the icy island of Solstheim, there lives an ancient culture, tracing their lineage back to the rule of dragons. The Skaal call this harsh isle home, a small community bearing a striking resemblance to the Nords of Skyrim. As a resilient, hardy group, their seclusion allows them to live in tune with nature as their culture dictates, worshipping the Allmaker as the one true god. Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. My name is Michael, and today we're going to be diving deep into the legendary Skaal and the unique views that make up their religion, which may even originate from the very forces that forged the universe. The Skaal tribe are Nords for all intents and purposes. Their physicality and lineage all points to the tall, burly men and women of Skyrim. Where they differ primarily is their culture and religion. Born from the Nords who served the dragon priests and dragons who ruled over the land during the Merethic era, their culture diverges from traditional Nords here. Skaal legend tells of Solstheim being split from Skyrim after a great battle between two mythic figures, the Guardian and the Traitor. A tale of Daedric seduction and punishment, we know these two figures as Valok the Jailer and Miraak the first Dragonborn, the Guardian and the Traitor. Their fight was born of Miraak's betrayal of the dragons and the influence of Hermaeus Mora. Valok was sent to kill him for his crimes and very nearly beat him. At the moment the killing blow was to be dealt, Miraak was whisked away to Apocrypha by Hermaeus Mora. The power of their clash is what the Skaal believed split the island, with the two hurling arcane energies and the thum at one another, reportedly lasting for 4 days. This was the last we saw of the Traitor until the 4th era. For more details on this time and Miraak's history and later impact on Solstheim, check out our video on him in the description below. Under the Guardian Valok, the Skaal enjoyed a peaceful and prosperous time. He was honored by the dragons for his victory over Miraak, placed in power to watch over the land should the Traitor ever return. As we now know, this return would happen in the 4th era, with the Jailer Valok, an undead Draga, deep in his tomb. We'll discuss the 4th era development of this legend a little later, but the story is key to understanding the origins of the Skaal. The legends before the believed split of Solstheim from Skyrim posit that the Skaal were placed there by their sole deity, the Allmaker. Only around 100 people make up the Skaal, and they see themselves as different to the Nords due to the fact that they believe they never came from Skyrim itself in the first place. Their organization structure is fairly simple. There is one leader of the Skaal who is responsible for protection of the tribe and of course general leadership. There is also the first hunter, which leads the hunters into the wilds of Solstheim to capture a feast. And there is the shaman, who is both their spiritual leader and protector against arcane dangers. The shaman also preserves and protects the greatest secrets of the Skaal. Speaking of things spiritual, what would the shaman actually teach? The Skaal are a monotheistic society, worshipping the Allmaker. They believe that all life flows from this one deity like a river, in time coming back to the god, where it is reincarnated back to the mortal plane. This is a unique perspective on death compared to both the Nords and their afterlife in Sovngarde and the other belief systems on Tamriel. "We Skaal do not fear death," says Freya. "We know we will return to the Allmaker and be born anew. Life never truly ends. Death is just a passage from one form to the next." If we look at some of the more metaphysical theories in the Elder Scrolls, the Dreamsleeve would match up with this idea of reincarnation, so the Skaal may have it right. The Dreamsleeve, for those who don't know, in very simple terms, is the idea that when a soul dies, it either goes to an afterlife or it goes to the Dreamsleeve, where its identity eventually gets wiped and it gets recycled as a new mortal being born. But regardless, I don't want to get too deep into an abstract theory here, but it is interesting to point out that if I were correct, then the Skaal would be right in their beliefs about reincarnation. As a product of this belief, the Skaal treat the world around them in a drastically different way to many, leaving as minimal an impact as they can upon it so that they do not ruin the land for their future selves. This goes as far as avoiding chopping down trees, opting to collect firewood from those already fallen where possible. It also means they only hunt the deer, hawkers and bears of the land where necessary for survival and never for sport. Their values are of great importance to the tribe, as the Skaal believe that at any moment that could be tested. A key part of their religion is the adversary, the antithesis of the Allmaker. This being is a multifaceted tester of the Skaal, seeking to corrupt those who would stray from the path of the Allmaker. One aspect of the adversary most prominently featured in Skaal legends is the Greedy Man. Many religions of Tamriel share the image of a trickster aspect derived from Padme. In elven cultures, this would be Lorcan. To the Nords, it it would be Shor, to the Nedic descended people it would be Shazar, but to the Skaal it would seem he is known as the Greedy Man. When the land was at peace in the early days of the Skaal, they became complacent in their worship of the Allmaker. The adversary is always watching for any weakness to exploit. Seeing this, he sent the Greedy Man to live amongst the people. After he had lived with them for a little time, the powers of the Skaal waned, leaving them unable to defend themselves via their warriors or shaman. Their gifts from the Allmaker removed. Fear gripped the small village, debating for days and nights who would be the one to take on the responsibility of restoring their reputation with their god. To restore the power of the Allmaker, a young man named Ava volunteered to seek out the Allmaker stones. Meditating at each of them dotted around Solstheim allowed him to speak with the Allmaker, retrieving the gifts bestowed upon them. His pilgrimage across the island returned the Allmaker's favor to the Skaal, banishing the Greedy Man. It's this story that the Skaal remember to ensure they never grow complacent in their worship once again. These Allmaker stones make up an important part of the Skaal belief system because of this story. Each stone is significant for a different reason, bestowing a blessing upon the people. The Water Stone blessed the Skaal with fish in the ocean and fresh water. The Earth Stone ensured the land was fertile, and the Wind Stone allowed the breeze to sweep through Solstheim. The Beast Stone gave the people food from the hunt, hides for clothes and warmth and beastly protection when needed. The Tree Stone provided fruit and shade, while the Sunstone gave warmth and light. All these blessings helped the Skaal to feel as one with nature and the land as possible, tending to them carefully to assure their protection. While most were happy to live by the way of the Skaal, a mead hall on the island of Solstheim reveals there were a few members of the tribe who wished to live like the Nords of old. In the Third Era, a small group of Skaal, led by Hrothmund the Red, founded a small settlement to the south of Lake Fjelding. These few lived without the restraint of the Skaal, embracing ancient Nordic values of fighting and revelry. The Allmaker-worshipping Skaal had little to do with those who decided to leave, possibly seeing them as tempted by the adversary. On a metaphysical level, the two forces recognized by the Skaal are deeply reminiscent of Anu and Padme, the two cosmic forces at the beginning of the universe. When you look at these two as the forces of stasis and change, each with their own aspects, the worship of the Skaal may be considered one of the purest in all of Nirn. While the majority of Tamriel's races developed pantheons of Aedra and Daedra, the Skaal seem to revere only the Allmaker, which could be seen as Anu, the universal force of order and the creator of all things. And if you look at the adversary, the antithesis of the Allmaker, you can see Padme, the limitations of Anu and cosmic force of chaos. Interestingly, the Skaal also recognize a being called Thartag, the World Devourer, as an aspect of the adversary. It's said they will one day come to bring an end to all creation at the end of seasons. As you've probably already assumed, we'd guess this aspect of the adversary is Alduin the World-Eater, trying to eat all of the Allmaker's creation. Up until the Third Era, the Skaal were allowed to practice their religion with relative freedom. Before this, the only major upheaval for the Skaal was the fleeing of Nords from Morrowind during the War of the First Council. Tragically, many Nords fell in this battle, sent to Solstheim for burial if they weren't able to return to Skyrim. Here the Skaal weaved natural magic into the Nordic tombs on the Isle, encasing the bodies in ice. This would be known as Stalrim, enchanted ice. The practice of creating Stalrim weapons and armor was highly guarded by the Skaal. As such, the ore would become highly coveted for its power when smithed into armor and weapons, with many seeking to strip Solstheim of this resource throughout the later eras. By the late Third Era, the Imperials had set up a presence on the island, Fort Frostmouth. The Skaal were distrusting of the visitors as they brought their own way of living to the Isle, digging ebony ore, chopping down trees, and killing animals without restraint. Throwing off the balance the Skaal so carefully protect, they regarded the Imperials as short-sighted, while maintaining a peaceful outlook in relations with them. This external influence on the land would come to greatly impact the Skaal, drawing them into a mystery of werewolves, Draga, prophecy, and ritual. Around this time, the shaman, Korst Windeye, discovered Lake Fjelding was set alight. Seeing this as a sign of the Bloodmoon prophecy, further investigation was conducted, finding that a Draga lord named Aislip was involved. Aislip was once a Skaal mage, cast out of the tribe for dabbling in dark magic. He was housed below the lake, where he once imprisoned a group of frost atronachs that sought to destroy the Skaal and all life on Solstheim. His dark magic sealed them away, and he turned himself into a Draga in order to stop the atronachs from ever escaping. In the Third Era, he destroyed the threat alongside the Nerevarine, completing his goal of protecting the Skaal even in death with his last act. With the fire and the werewolf attack on the village, they decided that a sacred ritual called the Ristag was to be conducted. This was done to appease the Allmaker and restore order to the Isle. The ritual involves hunting a spirit bear, collecting its heart for the village shaman to please the Allmaker. At the completion of this ritual, the current leader of the Skaal, Fasten Heartfang, was revealed to be a servant of Hircine and slain alongside an aspect of Hircine in a legendary hunt that would end the Bloodmoon prophecy. At the close of this betrayal, the Skaal were for a time left without a leader, with their shaman guiding the village until a fit replacement was appointed. By the Fourth Era, the number of Skaal remaining in Solstheim were dwindling, primarily due to their small populace facing the threats of the previous years. Their streak of bad fortune was far from over, however, as this was when Miraak the traitor chose to attempt to return to Tamriel. His influence seeped through from Apocrypha into the Allmaker's stones the Skaal held sacred, Miraak's will emanating from the very Isle, influencing the Skaal into rebuilding his temple and preparing for his return. This influence was gradually purged from each stone by the last Dragonborn, perhaps walking the path of Avar from Skaal legend. This came at the cost of many Skaal, including their previous shaman, Storn Cragstrider. His death came at the hands of Hermaeus Mora himself, giving up secrets of the Skaal in order to give the Dragonborn the power needed to purge the stones and match the power of Miraak. In the end, Miraak's ploy was foiled and balance restored on Solstheim. Ultimately, this tribe of Nords have a fairly unique perspective on the world, complete with their own mythology and system of worship. It's easy to see them as primitive when looking at the grandeur of others, but their respect of nature has led to quite a peaceful life on Solstheim. Unfortunately, their small numbers and way of life don't come in handy when trouble comes knocking, often needing a powerful ally like the last Dragonborn or the Nerevarine to save them from destruction at the hands of powers who don't respect the Allmaker's ways. But what can you expect from a relatively peaceful tribe of hippies, numbering less than 100? If you had the choice between living the traditional Nord life, drinking, fighting and enjoying the open landscape of the homeland, or embracing the simple but spiritual Skaal life, which would you choose? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Skaal Explained, an ancient offshoot of the Nords living a peaceful and natural life in the remotes of Solstheim. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and do head down into the comments and let us know what lore topics you would love to see covered in the future. Subscribe for more awesome Elder Scrolls content. My name is Michael from FudgeMuppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again very soon.